Hello everybody, my name is Vero, this is Vero Reads, and today I will be doing the audiobook tag. So this tag was created by BookBuds, and I've been tagged by Kevin Towle Reads. I really like Kevin Towle's tags. He has a lot of tags. If you're ever in need of finding a tag that's interesting and entertaining, go over to his channel because he's really good at making a tag really fun. The first question is, do you listen to audiobooks? And if not, why? I do listen to audiobooks, not often. It comes and goes. It's part of me being a mood reader. I need to be in the mood for audiobooks in order to listen to audiobooks. But I do listen to audiobooks. I want to say that at least one of my books per month is an audiobook, which is not a lot, but it's not nothing, you know. The second question is, has your use of audiobooks changed over time, and if so, how? My audiobook listening habits change through time, but most of the time I am consistent. I tend to listen to audiobooks in specific contexts and for specific books. And that leads me to the third question, which is, how do you choose which books will be read versus listened to? I do have tendencies. I don't want to say rules because they're never rules, but I do have tendencies. And my tendencies are to listen to audiobooks when a book is really big because it's really intimidating to, see that you've read 50 pages and you've barely made a dent into a 600 pages book. So audiobooks for big books, and also audiobooks for non-fiction. I tend to listen to a lot of non-fiction books. And I think that's the main reason why I would choose a physical book over an audiobook is because I'm a visual learner, and in order to understand the prose, like in order to follow with how something is written, not just what is being talked about, I have to read it with my eyes. It's kind of like when somebody is explaining a board game to you and you're like, please let me just read the rule book. You can explain it to me in the most clear and extensive way, but if I'm only listening to you and it doesn't register and the words are not registering, or if I'm being given verbal instructions, I always ask, could you please write it down, or let me just write it down and then double check that this is what you meant. So I'm really a visual learner, and my understanding of words and language is primarily visual. So if I'm listening to a non-fiction book, I still get what's being talked about. I still get the message. Like non-fiction books usually don't care about having nice prose or literary devices or something. But a fiction book or a poetry book, a lot of the time, do. With poetry, it's a bit complicated because there's also like the musicality. With poetry, I tend to read, but I read aloud. That's how I tend to read poetry books, because if I only listen to an audiobook, I'm not getting the cool word devices, the cool word play and literary devices. But if I'm only reading, I'm not having the musicality of the language, and so I tend to read aloud, so I get both. Or my preferred method overall is immersive reading, which is when you listen to an audiobook and you read. I think that I started immersive reading before I started listening to audiobooks. The first time I listened to audiobooks was because I was doing immersive reading, especially because I was reading books in English, which is my second language, and a lot of the words I didn't know how to pronounce, and it was really weird to understand how the sentence structure flowed, because it's really different compared to Italian. The first audiobook I remember listening to was Great Expectations, and I was listening to it whilst reading the text because the text itself was really hard for me at the time, and listening to it really, and also big book for my standards, big book, so that also helped. What was the question? Yeah, so in terms of of which book I choose to read versus listen to, I tend to listen to non-fiction and books that I know are more plot focused more than prose focused, and then I really want to read books that I can tell there's an artistry in the way it's written, like in the word choice and the literary devices. Question number 4 is, do you look into narrators before you listen to a book, or you go in blind? I tend to preview the audiobook narrator because I need to vibe with the audiobook narrator, but I don't have a preference I don't recognize narrators' names because again, I'm a casual audiobook reader. Yeah, I always preview the narrator because if the pacing is wrong or I just don't like how the cadence of how they're reading, then I will try and find a different audiobook narrator. That does not apply to LibriVox. LibriVox is this website where volunteers read and make audiobooks of texts that are in the public domain, so loads of classics. And because they're volunteers, I don't have high expectations on, it needs to be read in a certain way. And they are usually like very clear and they do what's needed to be done. Like you understand what's been read and they might not have the most pathos ever, but I don't know, sometimes I prefer an amateur narrator over a professional narrator that's doing something I don't like. So when it comes to LibriVox, I don't care. I can listen to any narrators. And a lot of the times they have multiple recordings for the same book, so you can choose, even with something that's completely volunteer based and completely free, you can choose which narrator you'd prefer. Question number 5 is, do you multitask while listening to audiobooks? And if so, what else do you do? Most of the time when I'm listening to audiobooks, I am immersive reading, so I'm usually reading the text. But if we don't count that, I knit a lot and I do chores, or I tend to do it during a commute, so I'm just walking somewhere. Again, I tend to need to pay a close attention to the audiobook, otherwise I don't get what's happening. I miss stuff because again, I'm not an audio learner, I'm a visual learner, so I tend to pay close attention to the audiobook, otherwise I'm completely lost. Question number 6 is, if you're reading a series and you listen to the first book, would you ever switch to reading a later book, or do they all now need to be listened to? It depends. Most of the times, if I'm listening to a book, is because I'm okay with that type of writing in audio format. So it means that I am able to follow along whilst listening to it, and I don't have to switch to reading the book. It really depends on availability as well, because I tend to listen to audiobooks mainly from my library. So if my library has the first book but not the second, and I really want to read the second, I might go and just read the physical book. Yeah, I tend to keep the same format for series, just because I don't have to, but I tend to. There you go. Question number 7 is, what percentage of books you're consuming currently are audiobooks? Let me check my story graph. Just a sec. Okay, let's see, for example, 2024. Okay, so for 2024, 13% of what I read was in audio format compared to 75% print, and then another 30% digital. That's not too bad. I thought less. I know it's very little. But I genuinely thought less. So yeah, 13% of what I read last year was in audiobook format. And to be fair, it might be more, it might be less, depending on immersive reading. Then there's a bonus question, which is, do you have a favorite narrator or a favorite book that you enjoyed in the audiobook format? Because I don't read audiobooks that often, I don't pay attention to who is reading what. I think my favorite narrator ever, just because I remember his name, is Stephen Fry. I think he's a great narrator. So I want to say him, especially his complete Sherlock Holmes collection. And also just in general actors, I feel like Andrew Scott is really good at narrating. I'm listening to The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, read by Aja Ando, who is Lady Danbury in Bridgerton, and she's really good. So yeah, usually voice actors are my favorite type of narrators, or actors in general, that are able to act what they're reading. That was it. That was the audiobook tag. Thank you so much to Kevin for tagging me, and thank you so much to BookBuds for coming up with the tag. I shall be tagging a few people just because I'm really curious about your answers. I want to tag Roz from Scully Dandling About the Books, because I know I just watched her Snowbometer tag, and she was talking about audiobooks, and now I want to know more about her audiobook setup and her audiobook habits. Olivia Savannah from Olivia's Catastrophe, of course. Katie from Books and Things, because I know that she does listen to a lot of audiobooks, but I saw that I think she tends to do rereads on audiobooks, but I'm not sure. So I would really like to know more. Also, Caitlin, if you're watching this, I tag you whenever that happens. I tag you. But yeah, thank you so much for listening to me. I hope you have fun with this tag. Also, I tag anybody who wants to do this tag. Anybody who wants to do this tag, please go ahead. I'm really interested. There's a lot of conversation around audiobooks and reading etiquettes and bookish discourse, but I don't care. I'm just interested in knowing all of you better as a bookish community. Once again, thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!